anything in terms of housekeeping. Passing over to Charlotte, who's going to introduce the session itself.
Thanks, Zoe. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all. I'm Charlotte Jones. I'm Chief Exec of ITC. And I suppose this session is a little bit like something we often do in Edinburgh to a large range of people looking to kind of work in the sector and learn more about it. And so we've asked 3 of our board members to join us today. All of these 3 board members have worked as producers, but are also kind of giving that perspective of their role as board members. So without more ado, I'm going to introduce you to them all. They are Ali King from Turtle Key, who is our chair, Ines Tercio from Fuel, who is a recent join to our board, and Sarah Jane Watkinson, who is an independent producer based in the West Midlands. So I'm going to start with you, Ali. Just give us your thoughts on producing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Yeah, I'm Ali, and I run an organisation called Turtle Key Arts, and we're actually set up to support young and emerging artists and companies, and to also help companies that we find the work interesting, so they're quite original and groundbreaking work. So we work with a cohort of artists and companies. It's really important to us as producers that actually access and accessibility to the arts is embedded in what we do, and that the companies and artists we work with also have an engagement and outreach program that runs alongside, so we can really reach community. At the moment, we're currently working with 7 artists and companies that tour work, well, normally tour work nationally and internationally, and obviously we've been adapting life post-COVID, which we can talk about a bit more. So I think for me as a producer, it's really important. We're very hands-on producers, we're creative producers. We like to get involved right at the beginning and work from the very sort of offset, so from sort of page to stage, so that you can actually input. Obviously there's a lot of admin and kind of unexciting elements around producing which have to be done, but we're very keen to sort of help shape teams, help steer the companies and artists' vision, helping them realise that with our sort of expertise and contacts that we've built up over the years. We also do a lot of meeting young artists and producers to help them shape applications or plans. We always have a very sort of open door policy to that, so if there's anyone on here that wants to sort of reach out afterwards, very happy to. Yeah, so I've been producing for a long time and obviously learned it very much on the job. I originally came from a stage management background, which I think in producing does sort of help. You never truly lose a stage manager as a producer. And I am chair of the ITC board, so obviously, you know, running a performance arts organisation that's helping artists and companies. ITC is invaluable, obviously, with all the support you can get for legal advice, for contracts, for all that sort of information, as well as being part of a membership where you can realise, you know, that you're not alone and that you can get access to sort of training courses. So, you know, as a small organisation, and that has been invaluable for us. So, yeah, I hope that's a good intro. We sort of work across physical theatre, dance, circus, and new writing. We don't tend to produce traditional models of theatre, and we tend to operate in small to mid-scale venues and festivals, but got a lot of experience and I'm very happy to answer any questions and give any advice that I can be at all useful and impart, I hope so.
Thanks very much, Ali. Ines, would you like to quickly introduce yourself and your role as a producer in the sector?
Hello, my name is Ines, and I'm actually the executive director at Fuel. And Fuel is a producing company and touring company. We tour the breadth of the country and internationally. Obviously, this year our plans were put a little bit on hold. I've been at Fuel for 2 years now, and we have an in-house team of producers that works with independent artists. Representation is at the heart of everything we do. So as Charlotte mentioned, I've been at ITC, just joined recently the board from June, but before Fuel was already a member for a long time. The role of ITC is really valuable to us as a company, both for the training it offers. So most of our producers on our team take training regularly at ITC, which is really interesting. So the opportunity to share with others within the industry and to learn and progress is something that we really value within our team, because producing can be quite an isolating job. So I think it's quite nice to keep refreshing, and ITC, especially around contracting, fundraising and budgeting, offers really valuable training. Likewise, I think the work that ITC does is very bespoke, so we really value, particularly around contracting and negotiating with venues, having someone we can talk to. One example was last year when we were doing our first commercial transfer and lead producing that. ITC was key in helping us negotiate the co-pros, in making sure our contracts with performers were correct. So it's very good to have a sounding board and someone that is on board with us to protect our interests, because often we find that we're working in isolation, and it's really good to have that legal expertise and financial and fundraising expertise that sometimes we don't have within the team, or we need further support. So I'm really happy to be part of this session and to answer some more of your questions.
Thank you very much, Ines. And Sarah Jane, do you want to just quickly let people know who you are and what you do?
Hello, I'm SJ. I'm an independent producer based in Birmingham. I'm currently working with several people, but only one of them is actually based in Birmingham, and that's Altered Skin, which is a CIC and a physical theatre company that blends text with Indian dance. I also work with Paul O'Donnell from Coventry, and Sleepwalk Collective, who are based in Spain. Little Soldier, who are half in Spain and half here, and that's causing me some headaches at the moment, I can tell you. And also I'm developing a project with a collective called The Polar Bear, which is Nat Bellingham from Uncanny Theatre and Daniele Penati from Teatro Sotterraneo in Milan, which is also causing some interesting moments. But before that, I've worked. I think that the relationship I have as a producer with the people I work with, it varies from case to case. Sometimes I'm in partnership. I think the producer should be in partnership, particularly somebody like me working independently. But sometimes it is just like we're a collective, and we are working jointly. Sometimes I'm being employed, in a freelance capacity directly by a company. So there's a bit of a mix of legal relationships in those relationships, but the overriding thing is that I think it should be a partnership, and that it should be a partnership of equals, that it's not just a bolt-on. I'm not just there to do the admin, and I've actually, I originally trained as a theatre designer, so I do still vaguely consider myself an artist, and I kind of fell into this by accident, like a lot of people, I think. And also a lot of artists kind of accidentally end up self-producing. And I was one of those that in a group of people ended up being the organised one that, it was a long while ago, so it wasn't emails, it was phone calls and letters and stuff. And even checks, we got paid by check, it was very exciting. So I think I've, like Ali said, I learnt on the job as well. But I don't know everything. I've worked as a general manager as well for several companies, and I've worked in education, and I've also worked in community and participatory arts. So I have quite a broad knowledge of stuff, but I don't know everything. And for me, on my Lonelyo, because I don't have a company that's got like an HR department or whatever that I can ask stuff, or finance department. I sometimes get emails from people asking to speak to their finance department, and I just put them on hold, briefly, and then speak to myself about it. It's that sort of thing. I'm flattered that they think that me and my laptop is this kind of massive operation, but it's incredibly useful to have this resource at your fingertips, and also that wealth of knowledge and experience. And also to feel like you're part of a community, because I think often if you're working on your own, or if you're just a small company, like Little Soldier is just the two of them and then me, really, so, and we've not actually met physically since December last year. So it's really nice to feel that you're part of a community, and a community of other independent organisations. And I think that's a really important thing that ITC can bring, that you feel that you've got that kind of weight of people and organisations behind you, if you see what I mean. Not really sure what I think that'll do from.
Thank you.
I think that'll do from me now. So yeah.
Thanks, SJ. So really, the floor's over to you now. Probably one of the things I'm not sure if we said this at the very beginning, but there on this Zoom call there is a chat facility, and if you have a question, it would be really helpful if you could kind of write it in the chat and label it in capital letters question. That way we can get to you. But we can also, I can only see about 20 of you on screen. So if you happen to be one of those and want to wave with a question, then that's absolutely fine as well. So if we can kind of manage the sort of writing your question in chat or waving frantically at me, then we'll see what we can achieve. I think I might start actually with our general manager, Zoe, because I know you had a question about producers and unions, didn't you, Zoe? Do you want to begin with that?
Yeah, it's something that comes up quite a lot, and I thought it might be a question that would be useful for a fair amount of people on this Zoom, especially those that are independent producers. We find that independent producers join ITC, but that I think it's always interesting to know what the differences are between ITC as a management association and a union, and kind of how they can both benefit producers in different ways. And if any of the panel have experience of that or any thoughts on that, would be really helpful.
I mean, I think, obviously I run an organisation, we're only a small organisation, so, we don't have an HR department, and we do have a part-time finance manager, so unlike SJ, I can actually pass the phone over, which is handy. But yeah, I think anyone, I think in this day and age, certainly probably as an independent producer, needs a bit of protection. I mean, ITC is fantastic, as we've said, for advice, for being part of a community, and obviously they've got great expertise and legal knowledge as well. But obviously for you as independent producers out there to feel protected and feel that someone's obviously fighting for your, your case of your daily rates or how you're treated by the people you work with. And again, I'm with, SJ, I think, all of our relationships with our artists and companies, I mean, some of them we have long relationships with, some artists we might work with for just a project or a year, but they are, it's got to be a partnership, and those that go on and stay on and develop are those that are successful partnerships. So I would say for, personally, if you're an independent producer, I think, probably now more than ever to have that sort of support of a union that is actually sort of setting out terms and conditions. Because again, if you're an independent producer and you're working from your living room, I have it as a small organisation, the danger, now with modern technology, you'll be doing emails at 9-10 o'clock at night, and also when I have to sort of occasionally kind of bring my artists back and check, and production weeks all gloves are off, but I have to sort of remind people, hang on, it's only me, you can't keep ringing me, because if all my companies ring me and artists ring me, I'll be on the phone 24/7 7 days. So I think it's also about protecting yourself, having those working boundaries, that obviously our job isn't necessarily 9 to 5 and can't be if you're across the country, or you've got a show in production, or you're some crisis, because it's always the producer that gets the phone call, they've turned up at the hotel and the hotel pretending to know nothing about the booking or whatever might happen. So I think I think a union in that sense would help protect the individual producer in terms of that extra support of hours work, that sort of sense of kind of you've got someone to sort of go to, and setting some working directives, I think personally would be really
I definitely agree with that. I'm, as well as being in ITC, I'm also in BEC2, and I find that sort of individual support and representation really, really useful, because I've been able to go back to a few T's and C's with people and go, hello, you know, and lay a few ground rules down. Also, Bec 2 are more empowered to actively act for you on an individual and personal basis. So, for example, when a venue at Edinburgh that had not been going for terribly long, let's call it Winter Hall, had not been paying out its fees to people because they'd been cash flowing their new development, and they hadn't paid their artists after 6 months. It was Bec 2 who I was able to contact, and their legal department very efficiently dealt with it, and 48 hours later this payment mysteriously appeared in my bank account.
Thank you very much, Dave. Brilliant. There's a question on the chat from Kate about bid writing. I'm wondering if you'd like to very quickly articulate that question, Kate, and I'll probably direct it to Ines, if I may.
Yes, hello. I'm fairly new to to one aspect of producing. I've been doing other producing, but I'm finding more and more I'm being asked to do the admin, and specifically the bid writing and things. But I'm interested in how do I expand that. So, for instance, rather than pretty much, I think all the bids I've ever done have been to conventional funders or funders that are already signed up to do work. But I'm interested in if you've got any tips for how you might approach unconventional funders, or indeed do you, yeah, that's the question, really.
Ines,
I would say fundraising is about relationships, pretty much like producing. So I think to think more about it rather than bid writing, about how you can establish relationships with people that share the same values or priorities. So if you're working independently and you're raising funds for a particular organization, I would start by understanding what is their history of individual giving and who from their board has particular connections. So you might find that they've had a donation from a member that has been giving £100 for each month for the last 3 years. Potentially now is the time to approach that person and to talk to them about a specific scheme or whether they would be open to giving more. We are finding that now individual donors are more open to have conversations, and if they are attached to organizations, about joining their individual giving with corporate social responsibility. So potentially of expanding their gifts. So we found that this year with a couple of individual donors we have. I would say it takes time to cultivate donors. So it's I think often in the sector we go for what we know, and we write bids for project grants and for trusts and foundations. But now more than ever, they are very competitive. So I think establishing those relationships, and if you're working with an organization that has a pool of donors already in place, or even if they don't have, you can start that. I would always start from the board and from the people that run the organization. So they will have connections that they can introduce you to. So I would say start sharing what are the priorities for the organization with your board, with your artistic directors, and kind of almost do a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Are there any people that align themselves with what you're trying to achieve? And can you start a conversation with them? And normally there are 7 steps on how to cultivate someone. And I think almost bid writing is the last one. At first you need to understand and listen from the person about what they are interested and why they enjoy your work. But I think now is actually a time where we can spread a little bit and understand that we are finding that people are more willing to give bigger amounts because they understand that the sector is in dire need. So particularly since the start of the pandemic, we've managed to convert donors that either invested in commercial transfers, agreed to give bigger amounts from 20 to 60k when previously they were donating between 5 and 10. So we're seeing a bit of a trend, but I would say it's about keeping that relationship and engaging the person so that they feel they are part of the community, they are part of something you're creating together. Not sure that helps, but I would, yeah.
Thank you very much, Ines. Ross, I think you had a question about rates of pay. Is that right?
Yes. When I'm budgeting a production, I find it quite difficult to know which rate of pay to sometimes align ourselves with, because I always find quite a significant differences between ITC, UK theatre and equity. And also I can never find a suggested rate for a producer. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, or the panel's thoughts.
Okay, great. Actually, I might just start by saying something about basic rates before I kind of give it maybe to the panel to think about how to actually gauge the rate of pay for a producer. ITC negotiates industry standards with various unions, with Equity and with the Writers Guild, and with the Administrators Union, which used to be called Unison, but I think they're called Prospect now. And those are basic minimums. So that's the point. Is none of these rates are suggested or kind of target rates. They're a sort of bottom line. So you will find that you can certainly, as the bottom line, the producer's rate is kind of gauged alongside the actor's rate. Obviously that isn't necessarily the value and worth of a producer, but it's a sort of starting point. And we are about to enter into negotiations with Bectu actually to set a kind of minimum standard for producers, because they are a kind of under unionized sector at the moment. But I wonder whether panel wise you might like to just talk a little bit, maybe SJ, or maybe Ines, you've got your hand up, about how you might go about working out the rate for a producer in the sector, or working out how much you're going to pay people.
It's one that often comes up actually. We find the rates that ITC are very useful to start, have helped us start an internal conversation. So we have a freelancer pay policy, which includes anything from writers, producers, musicians, and we kind of use the rates of Bectu and ITC, but then we created our own policy to put minimums and ambition, so that there is a scale within that. We are about to publish it on our website, and then you're welcome to read. So what we've tried is to always say this is the minimum we will pay, and this is so that there's not that temptation to sometimes cut the cloth accordingly when funding or when the whole budget is not in place. But we also are more and more trying to work towards ambition. This is the minimum, but we would like as much as possible to go on the sliding scale. That has helped, and whenever we work with artists, we share our policies with them so that it's transparent. We find that really helps, so that people know where they are sitting, and so that they feel that there has been some thought, that there's not just a fee that is thrown at them and that there's no negotiation room. We found that has really improved the relationship between us as producers and the artists and other independent or freelance theatre makers and producers we engage with.
And I was
sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Go on, SJ, you go.
I was just going to say, it is really difficult, and I have that problem a lot still. I've been doing this a long time, so I know what I would like to be paid per day, and also kind of just looking at a project and sort of estimating how much effort compared to output it's going to take. If you know what I mean, you can usually, obviously, that's not an exact science, but you can generally get the gist. But even then, there are times when I think, do you know what, I'd really like to do this. This could be amazing, and it could also lead on to XYZ, and I will do stuff for mates rates. But also there are some people that do it based on a percentage of the total project cost. So say 20% or something. It's a fairly blunt instrument, but if you really don't know where to start, that could be a way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's really useful. I mean, very, very similar. I think it's knowing what your worth is. So knowing what your daily rate is. Well, so anyone, like, this is what I want to earn a day. And then we use the obviously equity and ITC minimum rates as a starting base. So we know that we obviously would never go below that, because we work with a lot of young artists, that are just starting out. So, and then obviously we've got our daily rate, and then sometimes it is looking at a percentage of the project, and we sort of operate between maybe 10 and 15% of that. And then, and again, it's that sliding scale. As SJ said, there might be a project or a young artist, because we sort of work with some people and they're just starting out. We go, okay, and then we're very clear about what we're going to do and the amount of time that's going to take, and then the fee that goes in with that. But I think if you've got a bottom line, a minimum, and you know your daily rate, and then you can kind of sort of up and down scale accordingly. But knowing, having that cutoff, I think that's really key. And at least those minimum rates, do that. And it is hard for, producers, because there isn't a set one out there yet, but it's knowing your worth and then shading up and down from that point. So very similar to what the others have said, really.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting at this point, it's not actually legal for groups of workers or groups of service providers to band together and set a rate for the role, for the job. That's what they call a cartel, and its anti-competition rules will stop you doing that. So the only way in which you can sort of set minimum standards is as a management association, as ITC is, in negotiation with a union, which is partly why we're talking about a relationship with Bectu for producers' sake. But it's not something that you as producers can do as a group. So any attempt to sort of try and do that would actually be breaking the law, if that helps and makes sense. And Ines, did you just want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit like something that I find quite useful sometimes is to set a rate, is to think about a number of things in advance, and that might help you set, even if you're working independently, about setting your own independent pay scale. So I think the levels we normally think about is the level of complexity and responsibility that any assignment or project involves. The level of experience and skills that are needed, and the length of relationship you might have with a specific artist or partner or an organization, and the requirements of the schedule. We find often, specifically independent producers, that sometimes we don't look at the length or the time that is needed to complete a certain some work. So I think it's very important to think, is this only going to take me a week, or is this going to take me 3 months? More often than not, and I think in the current climate, either we do a mates rates, or we settle for less, or for because we think, oh, it might take 3 months, but I'll just charge for 3 weeks because that's when the project is live. So I think if you looking at those parameters might help you individual to set your own fee, but also to negotiate fees with others. So yeah, just to add that.
Thanks very much. Thea, I think I might have missed a few earlier questions because I wasn't seeing the chat as it came up. Did you have a couple that you wanted to field?
We have a question from Kieran. Kieran, are you around? If not, I can just read out the question. So the question from Kieran was, what would your advice be to an individual who's taking on the producer role for the first time?
Who fancies that?
Yeah, we can kick off. Well, I think if you're taking on for the first time, I think the really important thing is as we've said, is to really be very clear with the artist or company you're working with exactly what is needed. So, you drill down, you know exactly what the project is, exactly what is needed, and then you agree who's going to do what. Because it's really important when working with an artist for the first time. As I say, when I do quite a lot of teaching to young artists and students, an artist knows their work better than anyone and can sell themselves really well, and should still get across the artistic voice and vision of their company. And hopefully as a producer, you're coming in, working with them, supporting that vision and helping them realise the planning and logistics around that to creatively then realise the project. So I think it's looking at that relationship, being very clear what you're going to do. So you've agreed it, and obviously things will fluctuate and change a little bit, and then you agree markers, where you can sit down together and kind of evaluate that, agree your kind of either your fee for those tasks or a daily rate. And as Ines has said, you know, how long is this? You know, are you talking a week? Are you talking a month? Are you 6 months? You know, and that's agreed. So, and then it can be quite a simple, you know, just between yourselves, you know, drawn up sort of letter of agreement, so you both know where you stand. And then as a producer, then you know that you're sort of empowered to sort of, you know, act on the behalf of the artist and work together. But very importantly, that it isn't sort of something where you're suddenly just given everything to just get on with, you know, that you've agreed clearly. And there's I think someone else put about, you know, where can you go and look? There is a UK producers group on Facebook that often people put in questions and advice, which is really helpful, and little things, and share sort of, you know, tips. Obviously, you know, if you are an independent producer working for the first time, I'd strongly advise joining ITC, so you've got that support behind you. And then maybe as well, if you're producing for the first time, it might be really good approaching some of the sort of either more established independent producers or you know, companies, and just say, look, can I buy you a coffee, like, you know, once a month, and just have just a bit of mentoring, just something that I can check in with as well. That would be sort of my advice to the first time producer. And you know, you will get things very, very right and very, very wrong. I mean, we're still learning. And you know, the early days when Turtle Key moved from being a venue to production company, you know, we made some, you know, we've learned from experience, you know, as SJ and Ines will say, of how the relationships can work. And so, you know, there will be a bit of that as well.
Thank you very much, Ali.
I would also add in something practical about lines of communication and being very clear about what they are, when, and what the boundaries are, so that you're not sort of bombarded with a variety of text messages, WhatsApp calls, phone bits, emails, and things are not spread around all over the place. And just making sure that you've got one central place where the information that's needed to be shared is shared. I mean, I you know, Google Docs has been a boon, I can tell you. That sort of thing never used to happen back in the day when I was starting out. And I just, you know, it's just fabulous that you can actually collaborate like that. But you do still need to be very clear about those lines of communication, how, when, how much, all of that kind of thing, so that you're not fielding, you know, crazy things at, you know, 10:30 at night.
Thanks so much. Ines, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think both what Ali and Sarah Jane mentioned is absolutely spot on. Recently, we worked with an artist that produced an access rider, which I found that is a super interesting document. So she kind of highlighted in a page before we started working together how she likes to communicate. So she has access needs. What are the best methods to communicate with her? When to send the emails? What type of information, in terms of deadlines, how much time in advance she needs, the format that she needs to see stuff. And I actually thought this is something that we all industry could do with producing access riders when we start working with each other, because it kind of sets the boundaries, because as we know, it can be quite fluid. So it can be like Sarah Jane mentioned, that we're still working at 10:30, but actually, especially now where our personal lives and our work lives are blurred more than ever, we're working from home, we are digitally. So I think that is quite an interesting exercise to do, because it kind of sets the parameters from the start, so you know what to expect. I think the idea from Ali around the mentor is really key. If that's your first the first time you're producing something, which can be quite isolating, because you're going to be fielding with a lot of admin, contracting, budgeting, potentially fundraising. I think it's good to have someone else that has been there to kind of a sounding board, or someone that you can call. And you'll find that in the sector, people are very eager to help. So I think if you can get an informal or formal mentor that can advise you. And the third thing I would say is evaluation. Start thinking about evaluation from the start of the project. I think it's quite important to learn from our experiences, and not one producing experience will be the same as the next. So because we're all working in a bespoke way, and artists, and the work each time is different, and each time will present different challenges. So I feel if we don't evaluate as we go, it's very easy, because we're all so busy, to jump onto the next thing and not have time to digest what we've experienced and to kind of learn through the experience. So I would say, and I know at ITC there's some really good courses around evaluation, because more often than not, we just do evaluation when it's to write those reports for the funders. But I think if we embody it in the working practice, it will help us become a better producer and managing relationships with our partners, artists, and other stakeholders better. So we normally set objectives at the start of a project to help through that learning in action, which sometimes gets lost because we are so busy. So those would be my 3 tips.
Thank you very much, Ines. That's great. Good.
Could I quickly add something to that as well, which is, especially when you're an independent producer and it's just you and there's not a big group of people, that you do actually have quite a pastoral care role as well, and you do need to be prepared for that. That you are the person that will get wrong if somebody is stranded or there's snow or whatever.
Yeah,
I've had to get people out of all kinds of tricky situations, and you do have to be prepared for that. And I understand, and I'm kind of like, so like my partner knows these people are on tour, I'm on call, kind of thing. So I'm normally very protective of my, because I work from home anyway, even pre-COVID. I'm very protective of my time and space, but there are times when you just have to be available, and there are some times when you just all of the stuff has to go out the window. Like I've ended up holding somebody's hand through a very distressing medical emergency because somebody had to. She was from South Africa and had no family close by. So somebody has to do that. So occasionally you do really have to step up and do some quite difficult stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does become like that as a producer. So I think, again, if you've got times during the relationship to check in, and you can get yourself maybe a more established producer as a mentor, because the buck does often stop with you. So to be able to then go off and have a coffee with someone and kind of decompress that and talk about it, because we've all done some very weird and wonderful growth on the very uplifting side, but also on the very sad side, and you can end up needing to, there's got to be a flexibility around being a producer, because there will be a need sometimes 10 o'clock, but if you've got those boundaries, then it's when those things happen, it's appreciated, understood, and that relationship's very clear. So transparency as well, and honesty, I think, with your artists you're going to work with is really key.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for those. There's a question, I think, from Gloria Lowe. Have you got sound? Can you just articulate your question? It's to do with funding, I think, wasn't it?
Hello. Yes. So it's just this one. I'm kind of I've self-produced a few things, so I'm still very much an early career producer, but this question has flummoxed me quite a lot. How does one fund, as a self-producer or as a producer of other people's work, the preliminary work that is required, which is sometimes the actual funding application itself? So I found myself doing a lot of preliminary work where I'm not paying myself, or another person isn't paying me for that work prior to any kind of funding from external body.
Yes, the much vexed and overarching question of how we actually kind of got off the ground before putting in a funding bid. Who would like to start with that? Ines, is that something that you feel you could address?
Yeah, there's different models. Some people work on the basis that they will, if they're independent fundraisers or freelance fundraisers, that they might take a percentage on a successful bid. But more often than not, when we are producing and fundraising, getting the project off the ground, that is not the case. So you could not charge a fee for your time. And I think it goes back a little bit to the previous question around fees and how to account for your time. So I think when you account for your time as a producer, you should definitely count those days that you're bid riding and getting the project off the ground. So there is 2 models, which often I think in the sector we don't do when we're budgeting for a project, which I advise is to do a full cost recovery. And full cost recovery means adding every single item, including time spent prior to the project, as part of the project budget. If you do it that way, when you apply for funding, you can include part of your fee in it. Sometimes you have to be cunning in the way you itemize that fee, but definitely when you think about your fee as producer, if it involves getting those initial funds, your fee should include prep work attached to it as well, and that will be a full cost recovery. And you will see in guidelines, some foundations, particularly Big Lottery, really advocates for it, that you should do full cost recovery when applying for funds. Others are less transparent, but I definitely think that's something that we often forget because we don't want to apply for too much, but we should definitely itemize it. And even if the fund explicitly says they will not cover prep work, you should add it as in kind, because I think we need to start putting a value to the work we do. And people should be aware that, you know, it's not, the project doesn't start when the 15K are raised to do the R&D. The project has started before, when you've done X amount of meetings and developed the application, etc., etc. So I think it goes hand in hand, looking at the guidelines of the fund, accounting for your time, and the time it spans from pre-production, production, and post-production. And looking at those rates and how you itemize your rate and how that breaks down. So I would say that would be the first point of call.
Yeah, I would concur with that. That it kind of, a lot of the time the fees that I negotiate, it includes a chunk for the work that I've done in the lead up. But you do have to be careful how you word that in applications. Yeah. Because you're like for project grants, for example, that you're not allowed to ask for money for work that's already taken place. But also I've been doing this increasingly. I've just been really upfront and said, no, you have to pay me for this bit, because there is no guarantee that you're going to get the money, no matter how what. I've got a very strong track record of Arts Council applications and what have you, but they don't all come off. But I have still done that work, and there are some projects where I'll kind of do it on a no-win, no-fee, because it's something that I really want to happen, and I can see a longer-term relationship or a longer-term benefit from it. But there are some where I just have to say, and it's quite hard to do even now for me, you know, 30 years into this, it's very hard to take a deep breath and say, yeah, and to actually say out loud, if you want me to write this application, it's going to cost you this. And sometimes there's a bit of a, oh, you want paying for this part? Yeah. It depends. It's not very scientific. It depends who it is. It depends on the project. There's some people that I just have to ask. Sorry, I can't elaborate.
Thank you. Great, SJ. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I think there was a question about networking and finding work, wasn't there? Was that someone called Susie? Yeah, brilliant. Susie, are you there?
I am, yes. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, my question was about when you're starting out as a producer, how do you find work? How do theatre companies or people find you? And also, are there any places that it's good to go to make those kind of connections, either with theatre companies or with other producers?
Thank you very much. I think, Ali, you started to say something about this, didn't you, before?
Yeah.
Let's just kind of embellish that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Susie. I mean, it's worth checking out the Facebook UK Producers Group. I think Alid, who's on our board, has put a link into the chat. I think that's a really good start. Again, if you're not already a member of ITC, obviously, well, normally, and even we're going to do something digitally, have an online conference, which is a great way of meeting other people and connecting those networks. Sometimes places like the Arts Council, ITC, people will post listings, you know, for jobs that will go out. People are looking for an independent producer, and then, you know, and also, again, it's connecting, I would say, you know, old-fashionedly, those organisations that, or those people that are producers in organisations or are running those sorts of cohorts. It's to sort of say, can I come and have a chat? You know, can I leave my details? And, you know, because I often get asked, and, you know, if I don't know the person, I can't obviously advocate or recommend, but I say, well, you know, there are a few independent producers, you might want to talk to them. You know, obviously I can't, you know, I'm not recommending, but I can pass on information. So those companies and independent producers will sometimes, you know, there'll be a network that way. And if you start to reach out to them, You know, and obviously as you build your own reputation, you know, people will obviously then start to recommend you on. But that's a sort of good start. I'm sure the others have got other things to leap in.
Yeah,
that's a useful start.
Ines, did you want to comment on that?
It's a tricky one, right? Because sometimes it feels as you don't know where to start. I would say the UK producers group on Facebook is very active, and there's a lot of empathy and kindness in that group, which is good to see. I think the Stamp network is also a good one to join. And it depends whether you are starting as a freelance independent producer, whether you're applying for a job in an organization. I think more and more independent organizations are trying to advertise for roles, so that the recruitment processes are more transparent. I would say if you see an opening, don't hesitate and call and speak about the role before applying. I find that's really helpful for you to understand whether that organization is good for you, as well as it kind of gives you rather than applying without knowing anyone there. So I would say when you're applying for jobs, call, get some more information, try and get a gist of what the role entails if the job description is not all encompassing. I would say trying to get a mentor within the industry is valuable as well. So yeah, those would be the things that I would add.
Yeah, great. Is that a hand from you, Zoe?
I apologies if someone's already said this, but another suggestion, very simple one, is the producers pool, which have a Facebook page. I'll put it in the chat. Again, it's a network of producers, and they have a monthly, currently a monthly Zoom meetup, which they discuss certain topics. It's a nice way of networking with producers.
If you're in the Midlands, there is, of course, the East Meets West network, which Gareth is involved with running, and there's various events and networking online and in the real world when we can actually get to do that. I've met some interesting people just through going to stuff, actually, and just getting to know people. I mean, I know that's tricky at the moment, but like, for example, like the Rep have their Foundry series of, you know, where they're supporting emerging artists and new work. They actually have sort of like meet and greet events where those people who are making new work are actually looking for producers. So that's, you know, so that's actually quite a good thing to do. China Plate's First Bite like showcase and things like that. So there's quite often things like that where there's like scratch nights, work in progress, blah blah blah. You know, if they're sort of young emerging companies, whatever, looking out for somebody to work with them, they've sometimes got quite unrealistic expectations about what you can actually do for them. But you know, so there might be a bit of expectation management in there. But yeah, it's a good place to meet people. Just be nice. Don't you get recommended? Be good at what you do and be nice.
It's interesting, actually. I mean, in all my years of working at ITC, I've always been completely bowled over, really, by the generosity of our sector. It is an extraordinary community. We do actually run, you know, when we're allowed to be live, one day we will be back again, but we run live forums for people to kind of actually meet each other, producers forums, general managers forums. We're running quite a few of them online at the moment, but one day we will be allowed to meet again. And yeah, I mean, whenever I find a few ITC members are gathered together, there is an extraordinary sharing of information and also a wonderful sharing of opportunity. I find that really exciting.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I mean, obviously it's a bit of a strange time, but again, you know, Edinburgh, when it runs, I mean, I know it can be quite brutal on everyone, but getting up there and getting to events and getting to shows and chatting to people, and you know, like SJ said about, you know, East meets West, depending what region and area you're based in, Susie, there's other sort of, you know, connecting with those sort of theatre networks in your area so that you can plug into that. And training courses are really good to, you know, get yourself on any courses or development courses, because then you'll meet other people and it'll connect like that as well. And yeah, being good, getting recommendations.
Somebody's just asked about Yorkshire networks, and I think somebody put up Rural Touring Forum, which is, yes, quite a useful one. Actually, if you use our website, there's a members directory which has got all of our members on it and where they are, and connect, and you can actually search by region, which is quite useful. You can actually use our notice board as well to kind of both advertise opportunities and jobs and advertise your need for a producer or a particular role. So do use that. It's completely free to members, so anyone can access that. We've probably got time for about one more question. Is there anything in there, Thea, that I've missed?
No, we've got oh no, we've had the Yorkshire question answered, so we've had all our questions answered, which has been brilliant.
I was just going to add, in terms of that networking one, very quickly, in line with what you were saying, Charlotte, with the ITC members directory, is ITC hubs. We have about 20 ITC members who have joined ITC as a hub, and that means that they run programs or events for local artists, producers, companies to develop their work, and they're basically supporting their local community of emerging artists, producers and companies. And I'll put a link now in the chat to where they are listed. You might recognise one of them as one of your local venues, and it might be worth approaching them, seeing what events they have and ways that they're supporting producers in their community.
Thank you very much, though. That's brilliant. Well, I would really like to thank all our panel members and indeed board members for participation in this session.